Okay, so this is episode one of our road to the World Cup 2027 South Africa. Each time you build up to a World Cup, you kind of try to look at the ideal team that you're trying to build. You look at the conditions that you're playing. So this is the first episode in that series that we're going to highlight now. And we want to get back to, instead of just identifying problems all the time, which is an easy
Which is
thing to put up on, right? Like when
yeah,
we were following these guys for so long, we're gonna take a different approach. That's what we discussed. Let's start looking at some solutions. So the most recent series that Pakistan played was against Australia. We could get into the squad and stuff, but I think even before that, we wanted to highlight some of the prolonged issues that Pakistan have had. Even if you go back to the 25 Champions Trophy, the 23 World Cup, of role definition, role clarity, and the most important thing, resources to fill those roles. So building
yeah.
towards South Africa, conditions that are going to be a little bit more pace bowling friendly. What are the standout things to you right now in our squad that we need to focus on going
I
forward?
think, like you said, like we're building towards the World Cup, right? So I think even if we almost put ourselves in the shoes of the people who are planning, and I think that's where we want to be, right? We don't always want to be talking about ye masle hai, wo masle hai. We want to talk about like what the solutions to those problems are. And so when you have to start where you start with identifying those solutions is like figuring out like what the problems actually are that you need to fix. And I think the easiest place for me to start is like the 2025 Champions Trophy because that was the most recent one-day tournament. Caveat that yes, we only played 2 games in that tournament because one was washed out. But I think those 2 games like helped us see a picture of where our one-day cricket is right now and like where it needs to go to compete with like the best sides. And then you can even go further back to the 2023 World Cup because I think a lot of the problems that we saw were in the 2025 Champions Trophy were also on show in the 2023 World Cup. Specifically, like I think the biggest issue for us in that World Cup was the form of our bowling attack. Because going into that World Cup, we considered ourselves to be like one of the favorites, and we were very confident about the chances. And yes, there were some injuries in the build up to that tournament with Nasheem Shah getting ruled out, which obviously broke like the structure of the team. But if we look at the fact of the matter, the biggest issues were the fact that our all-rounders were not incisive enough in terms of being bowlers, nor were they reliable enough with the bat. Our fast bowlers were not performing at the level that was needed. Yes, a lot of the tracks were flat, but hey, like in those situations, you need to have like some level of threat as a bowling attack to be able to peg the opposition back, which Pakistan did not have in the moment. And then obviously there were some issues with the batting as well, but I think the batting was less of an issue as much as the bowling was. And as a result, like we had a pretty poor performance in the World Cup. I think the number of runs we conceded automatically put our batting lineup under pressure. So
Yeah.
anything to add on
I
2023
think it was a
before?
mix, like, and I think it has been a mix because, like, this is maybe the first time in Pakistan's cricket history where you look at the bowling attack, and despite the talent and the names, they're not going to get done, and they're not incisive right now. Like, there's no two ways about that. They've not been Shaheen, Naseem, Haris, whoever it may be in these one-day tournaments. They haven't been incisive enough, nor have the spinners. And then you compact that with the fact that, like, okay, like you're saying, and you're not wrong, like the batting showed up to some degree in the World Cup, but not anywhere near the levels that we were expecting or anywhere
Yeah.
near the levels of the other teams, right? Like we didn't have
Yeah.
any, how many centuries did we have in that World Cup? Couple maybe, right? I think, and you alluded to it as well, Naseem Shah got injured, and it seemed like that was the biggest issue. Like we couldn't replace one
Mm.
guy. Forward to the Champions Trophy, Saima Ayub gets injured, and you need to, you make, I might be wrong. You made 4 or 5 changes after Saima Ayub got injured, right?
Yeah,
Like,
for sure. Because
oh,
Sam Ayub got injured and like what were the issues, right? Our opening batting was an absolute mess. As a result of that injury to Sam, what happened? We ended up planning for Fakhr and Babar to open the batting.
crazy.
Babar had never opened in 1 days before. Fakhr Zaman also ended up getting injured in the first game, and then Imam ul Haq was drafted in. So what that did was it exposed a real lack of options and a real lack of planning from Pakistan in terms of building like a bench strength to be able to deal with injuries, right? Same situation with like Naseem Shah in the ODI World Cup, except in that situation, like we drafted Hassan Alian, who was experienced. But again, like was he in the plans like immediately before the World Cup? No, he was not. Mohammad Wasim Jr. in fact was the backup or the fourth spacer in the squad at that moment, and he was actually then relegated to become like the fourth choice. But he got a game in the World Cup and he actually did well in. Like, the situation that we face consistently every single time is that we end up going back to the tried and tested. And when I say tried and tested, I think what I actually say is tried and failed players every time there's an injury because we have not planned efficiently to be able to build like a bench strength there, right? So that was one big issue, like where you were talking about there in terms of the Champions Trophy.
Yeah, man, role clarity is the biggest issue that they usually have. And bro, like, come on, Champions Trophy right now. And Husdel played well, but you needed his bowling that replaced Saim Mayu. They don't know what they want to do with the formation in terms of like, bro, 50 overs is not a format where you can have 10 overs from part-timers.
Yeah.
T20 में फिर भी थोड़ा बहुत चल जाता है. But you need to have 5 attacking options or 5 solid options in one-day cricket. Because you saw what happened. You had Abrar, you had 3 pacers. Then you mix between Khushdil and Salman Ali Agha. Bro, come on. You had 1 spinner in the whole squad. When you knew that you were going to play in the UAE, you had Usman Khan in. Why? When you were not going to use him as an opener. Because then when Fakhr got in, you called in someone else. You had so many middle-order batsmen. And you open Babar Azam, like there was just so much.
So exactly what happened as a result of it, right? Babar went to open the innings. Saud Shakil came in at number 3. He hadn't really played at number 3, even though you could say that that's a position that maybe he could play in. But again, had he been tested in that position prior to that? No. Tayyib Tahir drafted in at number 6. Does anyone think Tayyib Tahir, regardless of his talent or performances in domestic, is number 6 really the position for him? Is that fair to him or is that fair to the team? And if you wanted to play him at number 6, then why had you not tested him out in that position before? And why was he playing that position in the tournament? And then you put him in a position where he failed and he lost. And then, like you said, you already pointed out like the issues that one injury exposed in terms of the lack of planning for the batting order. What about on the field? Like once you actually had that team, the biggest issue was a lack of a 5th bowling option because you went with 3 pacers and Abrar, like you said. So I think that was an issue because then you had Khushdil and Salman Ali Agha making up the bowlers, the overs in terms of bowling. Or like you can't have the rest of your overs be filled by part-timers in a one-day game because what happens then is in the middle overs, you have no pressure on the opposition and they're able to milk their runs and build partnerships and that allows them to get to the final phase of the innings where they can explode. And that's exactly what happened against New Zealand, right? And then what happened? The Pacers were absolutely taken to the cleaners after that. So they were destroyed. I think Harsh Rofe went for like 80 runs in the New Zealand game. Like Shine freely went for runs. Wasim Shah was not performing at that level. So again, another issue with the bowling lineup. So I think in my opinion, there's a couple of different things that stand out. And before we get to the solutions, because we did say we're going to talk about planning. Look, lack of 5th bowling option, that is an issue that arose. I think the other thing was negativity with the bat and being unable to like impose your game with the bat as well, right? Take initiative as well. You didn't put the bowling under pressure. Let's just look at the New Zealand game, right? You're chasing 320. You're 20 for 2 in the power play. Babar and Rizwan end up just shutting up shop instead of counter-attacking to try to get back in the game. Like how do you expect to get in the game or win a game in a tournament where it's like a must-win situation? And of course, like the player you see taking initiative for Pakistan in that situation is Fakhr Zaman typically, and he was injured. So there was mitigating circumstances there. But regardless of like what players are missing or not, like you can't go into your shell. You have to be more positive. You have to try to go for a win there as well. So that was another issue. That was what happened in the New Zealand game. In the India game, we again had like similar situation, lost the openers early. This time actually Saud and Rizwan like built a good partnership. But again, what happened then? Like we weren't able to assert ourselves on the game. And then suddenly when like a couple of wickets were lost, we were behind in the game and we collapsed from a decent position from 150 for 2 to 200 for 7 and put in nothing total on the board, basically.
And we weren't able to assert ourselves on the game, but we did work hard to put ourselves in a position to assert ourselves in the game. So this is where we need to get a bit smarter, right? When you get to that 150 for 2 area, that doesn't mean you start hitting everything in the air. And this is a lesson that Pakistan is continually, whether you go back to MCG 2022, whether you go back to the final MCG 2022 against England, whether you go to this game you're talking about, whether you look at the most recent T20 World Cup or the Asia Cup that we played in the T20 format, you being in a good position does not mean that 5 guys come in and start hitting the ball in the air everywhere. And that's another thing Pakistan's going to have to continue to learn. Yes, we need to be a bit quicker in the power play up front, take those positive options, but there cannot be 0 and 100 without skipping
Mhm.
everything in between. And that's what we continue to do as a batting unit for the last 5 years. And we're not learning that lesson.
Yeah, for sure. I totally agree with everything you said there. And I think, look, we've harped on about like the negatives, but like, were there any positives to take? Again, we had pretty pathetic performance in both games in the Champions Trophy. The only slight positives I can pick out is that it was Abrar's first ODI tournament. He didn't pick up too many wickets, but again, he kept things tied
And you
and he had
can't
a
if no
decent
one's
tournament.
adding pressure at the other end, right? That's another thing you
Exactly.
also have to remember.
That's exactly it, right? So if, and again, we've identified him as someone who we can build our spin bowling attack around. So you need someone to be able to support him to be able to do that. Because again, so that gave you something that, okay, this guy has potential to be your leading frontline one-day bowler, which again has been sort of established with his continuing performances in the T20 game again. And the other thing that we saw in that tournament was that Khushdil, you called it out there, he did a pretty good job at number 6. Like he got 69 of 49 in one game, and then he got a run a ball 40 odd against India. Yes, as a bowler, he didn't do much, but again, he can't be expected to do much because he should not be a frontline bowling option. But as a batsman in number 6, he did a pretty good job. Wouldn't you? Would you agree?
No, he did a great job. I think he came out of that tournament as our best batter.
We learned that we need to widen the player pool to establish 3 or 4 players in each position, so you're better prepared to deal with not just injuries, but to deal with a loss in form as well, because that can happen for players as well. Someone has a absolutely horrendous run, a loss of form. You feel like you can't back them going into the tournament because they've lost confidence in themselves. That can happen, and you need to be prepared to be able to deal with that. We need better quality all-rounders, both pace and spin bowling. You're going to be playing in South Africa, so potentially there could be matches where you need 4 pace bowlers, but there's going to be other, because the tournament's also in like Zimbabwe, there could be situations where you need like more spinners as well.
Yeah.
So you need that 5th bowling option to be like a genuine all-rounder who can lead with his bowling as his primary facet. And then the form of our pace bowlers, Arman, is like a big concern for me. And then finally, like ensuring that players are played in the right position. So if you want to trial someone like Tayyib Tahir, because he's playing well in domestic, but there isn't a spot open for like the position he plays, which is like number 4 or number 5, then either rest the players who are playing in that position and are established during series, like the likes of the Bangladesh and Australia series that we just saw. So you can build depth or play them in a different role if you think he can fit that role, but then test him in that number 6 position in the series. Don't throw him in the Champions Trophy into a position he's never played before and expect him to deliver.
That's a great point.